All right, I'm glad to have Kevin Schmitt here with me today. He's one of the in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, one of the foremost firearms instructors in the Commonwealth of Virginia, probably on the East Coast. Does a phenomenal job instructing. Retired from a local sheriff's department. Has a lot of insights on tactics and things like that. And I wanted him to come in and just kind of talk about what his experiences were. So I'm glad to have you, Kevin. Tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and all that good stuff.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I've never watched a podcast, much less been part of one. So,
well, you'll definitely watch this one.
Yes. So this is all new to me. But,
okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised Campbell County.
Okay.
Went to Brookville High School.
Okay.
I thought I had a pretty normal childhood. When people hear something about childhood, they say that things that I was raised a little different than most. But
what do you think that is the most different about your childhood as opposed to when you talk to other people?
I think it's just a family thing. I mean, I hear that the Schmitts were just raised a little different than most. And,
but Schmitt with the double T, not a D.
Yeah, 2 T's. Yeah, right.
Double trouble.
But no, I often tell people that my dad is the meanest sober man I've ever met in my life, and I've never seen him take a drink. But he was meaner than most drunks I've ever seen. So
Brookville, when you went to Brookville, what was it like? You played athletics, correct?
Played football. Well, I played some baseball.
Okay.
But football, yeah.
And so you were good enough in football to go where?
I was offered scholarships on just about most of the East Coast, D1 schools, and against my better judgment, my parents wanted me to go to UVA. Okay. So that's where I went. Not that I love UVA. My wife loves UVA, so we follow it. Well, used to. It's just we don't follow it as much as we did, but school was not my thing. So if school's not your thing, UVA ain't your thing. Okay. Okay. So, but yeah, I played at Brookville, and then went to UVA on a scholarship.
What position did you play?
I played defensive tackle in high school. Okay. But in high school, I was 6'2", 220. That's exactly what I weigh today. So the same size I am right now, I went to UVA trying to play defensive tackle. And every day at practice, both the offensive tackle and the offensive guard that I went against every play. I was on scout team. Both went to the pros. Okay. So they both were north of 300 pounds.
And they both flattened you more.
They beat the hell out of me daily. Every minute of every play.
So you go to UVA, and then
they moved me to defensive end.
Okay.
To what's called an edge rusher. Okay. So that's where I ended up playing. My college was an edge rusher. Okay.
So how long did you stay at UVA, and then
I stayed there barely a semester, and I decided, first of all, football. I was a gym rat. Okay. I was not a football player. Okay. I was fast. All my cousins was fast. I mean, they were fast as cats, and we raced all the time. And so I was a gym rat, so I was strong and fast. So they saw an athlete, but I could care less. I don't know how in the world. I mean, you got kids today that are training to get a scholarship to college. So I don't know how I got a scholarship to college when I didn't even want it.
No, you worked hard. That's why.
I worked hard in the gym, but that's about it. Yeah. But no, so I left there, and I said, this ain't for me. I don't want to play football. So then I went to work. I left there and I took a job as building houses. Okay. And we started framing the house, and everything was going good until it was time to get on the roof. And and I was on the roof, and they was going to walk the edge and nail the rafters, and I was supposed to walk the rafters across this board. Now here I'm 220 pounds. I'm walking across this rafter, and they just stuck it was a 2x6, and that thing bowed in the middle. And I was there over the kitchen floor, and I said, it ain't no whole lot holding this thing. And that's when I realized I was probably a better football player than I was a carpenter. So
you didn't like the heights, and
I didn't like walking across that roof. I mean, that board. So I'd been offered so back in those days, other schools couldn't offer you a scholarship.
Okay.
Because my contract was with UVA.
Okay.
And I had left, and I had no intentions of ever going back. But I had started through alumni, had been getting messages, hey, if you will call Clemson, if you'll call some of these other schools, they'll offer you, they'll take you full scholarship.
So it isn't like the transfer.
No, there was no transfer. As a matter of fact, I had to go in when I left UVA. I had to go in and see George Welsh was the coach, and I went in and I talked to him, and he said, "You realize you need to leave here on good terms because I don't have to sign this." And I said, "I don't care. I'm not going back to play football." Well, after getting on a roof, I decided
I want to play football.
Well, I didn't really want to play football, but I didn't be on roofs either.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
Yeah, so I went. I said, "Well, I'm not going. D1. I'll just play some football." And so I went to Liberty.
Okay,
and I went over and for a couple of years, and again, just the football thing wasn't for me. I had I had some injuries, and you played football, right? And you'll find, and you know this. You got some injuries,
your joints and everything.
And I'd had a neck injury, and I had the neck injury at UVA going up against 600 pounds of pro football players pretty much and back then they encouraged you to hit with your head first, helmet first. And so I was leading, every play helmet to helmet with these guys, and it did some damage to my neck. And so I just said, I couldn't feel my arm, and I said, I don't really enjoy this anyway. Yeah. So I decided this is not for me.
It's not what I want to do.
No. So I left there, and just fast forward later, I had neck surgery like 20 years later to correct that problem. So, but anyway, no, I left when I left Liberty. That's when I went into law enforcement.
Where was your first place that you went?
Law enforcement, Campbell County.
So your entire career was in Campbell County.
The entire full-time career was in Campbell.
So you go to Campbell County. We talked a little bit about it. What was the academy experience like? I think kids get spoiled. They're like, oh, we're at the Armory and all this other stuff. But talk about like where you had to go to your academy.
So our academy was only 13 weeks. This was in 1987. So the academy was, and back then, Central Virginia Criminal Justice Training Academy had two locations. They had one here in Lynchburg. Right. And they had one in the south end of the state down in Boynton, which is in Mecklenburg County. Okay. But our class was 28 people, which was back then, especially for Boynton, was a big class. It's a lot of game wardens. Back then, the game commission went through the same academy. So we, they couldn't. The classroom in Boynton wasn't big enough, so we went to an old elementary school in Chase City. Okay. So, it compared to football that I'd had, I didn't think it was that hard. I mean, the academics of it was nothing compared to UVA. No, absolutely. So the academic part, just remembering everything on the test, and for testing purposes, was the most difficult. But physically, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't militaristic. It wasn't. I think it probably even then should have been. It was way more disciplined than it is now. Right. And I think it should have been.
So you didn't do marching and stuff like that? No. Y'all did a lot of running.
We didn't do any PT at all. In Boynton. Now in Lynchburg they did, but down in Boynton there was nowhere to do.
Nowhere to run. Okay. As
a matter of fact, our defensive tactics was on the playground out back, and nowadays you got to roll out wrestling mats for the students. In case they hit a boo-boo. Yeah, but back then it was just we did defensive tactics on the dirt in the old playground. Oh. And that's the only week we did PT. They want to see everybody do pull-ups, but the pull-ups was on top. The big swing sets that the real tall ones that the children play on. Yeah. So that's how we did. Climb up. You had to climb to get to the top to just do your pull-ups. And
so how would you get down? Like you just swing your leg?
You just drop.
How far was the drop?
I mean, it wasn't bad, but I guess by the time you reach up out, my feet was probably 4 foot off the ground. So
it wasn't like just stepping down then.
If you had enough strength to do your pull-ups and then shuffle back over to the step and slide down the side, I guess. But most of the students didn't make it to the pole, so they couldn't even make it up that much, less do a pull-ups.
Well, so you go through the academy. Your first assignment is patrolling Campbell County. I do have a question because I'm just curious. What was your first your first sidearm that you carried?
It was a revolver.
Okay.
It was Smith & Wesson's Model 681 357 Magnum.
So they had revolvers back then. Big, heavy gun.
Yeah, funny story. Speaking of the academy, so when we went through firearms, it wasn't but a week long, and it was just stand right here and shoot right there. That's basically it. I mean, it was still basically the same courses of fire that we still do to this day, as far as the test. You know, the measurement of skill. Some of the round count because has changed. There's a lot of 2 rounds 3 seconds and some 6 rounds in 8 seconds because everybody in the academy still had revolvers.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, I'd grown up in the woods, and I loved pistols, and I had killed just about everything you could kill in Virginia with a pistol before I'd ever went to the academy. So I thought I was pretty good.
Right.
But when I get to shooting out there, I realized that double action, I would always thumb cock. So I wasn't that good. I think my first score was a 73. So it wasn't that great. So
did you try to cock it when you got out there?
No, I didn't try to cock it. They told us, in the classroom, no cock, and that you had to double action. But the funny thing is, and I grew up watching Clint Eastwood is my man,
Dirty Harry.
Right. Well, not Dirty Harry, the Westerns.
Oh, okay.
So I had shot 6. I don't know, to this day, I don't know why I did it. It was just, it's like middle of the class. I fired, of course, if I was fired 6 rounds. I fired 6 rounds and I spun it back to the holster.
Did you get in trouble?
Oh, what do you think?
So you spun your revolver back?
Yeah, I was good. I mean, I just spun it right back into the holster. And oh
my God, what would you do if you, as a firearm instructor? What would you do? Would you be in awe of I can't believe they pulled that off? If you saw that,
I think the reason I did the ass chewing that I got was probably not as bad as it should have been, was because I wasn't a total idiot throughout the class. So I guess my reaction to this if it happened and I'm the instructor out there, it would be based largely on
what their proficiency
who they
was.
Are as a student. Well, if they do it today with a semi-automatic, then that's a whole different story. But it was an empty gun. I shot 6 times. I knew it was empty, but I don't know why. I mean, it was just like. I think I was happy with my hits, and so that
spun a gun.
Yeah, spun it right back to the holster. That's pretty cool.
All right, so you get done. So you start your patrol. I always laugh about all the equipment people have these days, and I still remember in Campbell County, didn't you have to grease your own light bar because it was on a chain?
The old twin Sonics.
Yeah.
The ball lights was them square of the red on one side, blue on the other, and they had a chain, and it was like a great big bicycle chain.
Yeah.
And you had to every so often you'd have to grease it, spray some WD-40 in it, and every now and then if that thing got loose, you'd have to take a link gate.
Okay.
So yeah, there was some light bulb maintenance.
It wasn't just put a switch on it and then take it somewhere if it doesn't work. You had to maintain your own equipment.
Pretty much.
So what do you remember the most? Any story that stands out to you? I think what we talked about is some kind of first transport. What happened there?
Well, that was so I was hired 3 days before I started the academy.
Okay.
So the first 2 days I didn't even have a uniform. I just rode with Lieutenant Joe Hall. He to this day he should be on the Mount Rushmore of law enforcement. I mean, he was country and he was a man.
Yeah.
And I rode with him, and he just had a take no BS attitude, and so. He was influential in my early law enforcement career. And the third day I got a uniform, and they told me that I had to go to Southampton to pick up a prisoner.
Okay.
Well, back in those days, there's no GPS. There's a paper map. That's what you get.
Right.
I've never driven a police car. I had never had a uniform. I've never been a deputy, a cop in my life. I'm 21 years old. And Joe said, he said, Schmitt, I need you to go down Southampton. I need you to get this fellow. And I said, yes, sir. He said, here's a map. He said, now, when you get down there, I need you to chain him up like Houdini.
I said, I can do that.
I said, okay. And he said, you ain't got no training. He said, so that's why I want you to chain him up. He said, put the leg irons on him, the belly chain on him, and handcuffs on him. I said, yes, sir. So he said, don't take all day. And I'm thinking, Southampton, no time I've been to the beaches on vacation.
And you're like, that's a ways to go.
That's a long way.
And we're not getting 30 or 40 miles to the gallon with that police car.
Right. So the police car I had, it was unmarked. It was still brown and tan. And back in them days, all the deputies' cars were still brown and tan.
All right.
So it was brown and tan, but it didn't have no ball lights. It had grill lights.
This little lollipop grill light.
Right. And it was it had a siren in the console. Well, as I was walking at the door, one of the sergeants told me, he said, don't forget you're a cop now. He said, so speed limit is a suggestion. And I said, yes, sir. And I said, I said, how fast can I go? He said, as fast as you want.
Oh, Lord.
And I said,
on 460.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went down to Southampton and I picked him up.
Okay.
And I chained him all up. And I'll never forget the guy said, why am I, this guy had been in and out of jail. He had been transported before.
Right.
So he knew he won't never chained up like this.
Right.
So he says, why have I got to wear all this? And I didn't want to tell him because I'm brand new.
Right. So what'd you tell him?
I told him I said, well, because the last guy that I didn't chain up tried to get away. And I said, I shot him. And I said, I got in trouble. So they told me not to shoot nobody this week. No, don't shoot anybody else this week. So he said, well, yes, sir.
I can do that.
So he behaved. So he's coming on up the road. Well, I don't know how I messed up, but directions ain't my thing. And I ended up in Petersburg. I was supposed to come back through Richmond.
Right.
Ended up in Petersburg. So I was totally lost. Now I'm really behind schedule. So finally found Richmond, got back on 460, but now I'm behind. And the lieutenant had told me, this is my first mission,
Yeah. You don't want to mess
and I'm
with
late.
That. Right.
Then I remember what the sergeant said.
I'm a cop.
So when I hit 460, I said, I'm going to go and open this thing up here. So I turned my blue lights on, which was just reds. And I hit the siren box.
Right.
And I had never been inside of a police car with a siren on. And it didn't sound very strong. It was real weak.
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe it's louder on the outside. So I'm running 100 miles an hour probably, I don't know, 85, 90.
Right.
Coming on back down 460. And I passed this troop on the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
I get all the way back to Concord. And I made it all the way back to Rustburg. And that's when I realized all I had was one blinking light in the grill, and it was red, and the siren didn't work at all. So I reckon that trooper thought it was a volunteer fireman
driving a police car.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was my very first mission.
Anything else you remember, like when you were doing patrol? Any other good stories from patrol or not? I mean, just routine.
None that just pops in my head. I mean,
do you remember what kind of shifts y'all worked?
Yeah, we do. We worked 8 hours.
Okay.
And we toyed around with several shifts. The first one was you worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
Off Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Then you'd work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Off Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Okay.
Then it would go back to Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So you was basically off 2 weekends in a row every 4 weeks.
Okay.
That was the first schedule we worked. The second schedule we worked, of course, in my history of law enforcement, the field division has always griped and complained about the schedule.
Right.
So the second schedule, everybody wanted every other weekend off, and the captain come up with an idea. You work 7 days on, and Monday through Thursday. I mean, Monday through Friday was 8 hours. and Saturday and Sunday was 12 hours.
Okay. So that was the first 12 hours that you thought.
So you'd work 7 days straight, the last 2 days being 12-hour shifts. Well, mathematically, you only had to work Wednesday and Thursday of the next week.
Okay.
But because most of the time you'd get some overtime here and there, and you got one holiday every month, so you could take one of those days off every month,
right.
And the other one is usually comp time. And if you didn't have comp time, you could take one vacation day, and you just pretty much worked a week off a week.
Okay.
If you didn't have nothing going on, just work your 2 days, save them up and some other time. But your week to work was your week to work, and you couldn't take vacation on those. But there was only so midnight shift only had to work Monday through Friday. That's the only time midnight shift had to work. They never had to work weekends, and it rotated so it was day shift, evening shift, and then there was night shift.
Okay.
But of course, people griped.
That sounds like a really good schedule.
I liked it. I really did like it.
Because you could plug a day in and you'd have a whole entire week
off a week. And it was basically 8 hours. That's except for those 2 days on the weekend.
And the weekends go quick anyway.
And then everybody would complain, oh, I'm just so burnt out by the time the weekend comes. So then we toyed with, well, let's just start the week on Saturday.
Okay.
So you work 12 hours Saturday, Sunday. Okay. Then you worked Monday through Friday.
They still bitched.
You will never make a cop happy.
That's true. So what was it? So go now to when you're you're sergeant and then ultimately the field operations captain. What was the most difficult thing about being a supervisor, like a line supervisor on the road?
So understand this. When I first started, I was my football career, I was hard-headed.
Okay.
And I was uncoachable to a large degree.
Okay.
My first few years as a deputy was very similar.
Okay.
It took me back then. If you hadn't made sergeant in 8 years, you weren't ever going to be one.
Okay.
So 8 years in, I realized that I wasn't a sergeant, and if I didn't change something, I never would be promoted. So, and it wasn't that hard to figure out why.
Okay.
So once I figured that out, my name started getting tossed around for promotions, and everybody said, well, there's a sergeant position coming up. You go put in for it? I said, nope. You need to put in for it. I said, I don't think I'm I'm the most qualified. And they said, well, then how will they ever know that you want to be? And I said, well, how can I go in and honestly say you should pick me when I know you shouldn't pick me?
Right.
So I never would put in for it. Well, the one before I was promoted, they convinced me to do it. And, so I did, and so I sat in. It was the sheriff, the chief deputy, and Joe Hall, who was the division commander. And the sheriff looked at me and he said, "Tell me why you think that you're the best for this job." And I said, "Well, I don't think I'm the best for this job." They looked at me like I had two heads, and they said, "Well, why are you here?" I said, "Everybody said I should put in for it to let y'all know that I wanted." I said, "But if I'm anything, I'm honest." I said, I don't think I should. They said, "Well, who you think I ought to get it?" And I said, "L.T. Guthrie." I said, and he had come there about a year after I'd been there about a year.
Okay.
And I said, "But that's who I would pick." And they said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've worked with him." I said, "I don't know if y'all see his performance." I said, "But I really think he should be next sergeant." Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. That being pretty much the end of that conversation.
Yeah. That was a short review board, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I was honest. So, so then, the next promotion, I did get it. Okay. And I walked in and honestly, I said, "Last time you asked me this question," I said, "I can tell you right now, there's not even a close second. I should be it."
Yeah.
And I was it.
Okay.
And so I was sergeant, and I will preface this by saying, I've wore a lot of hats in my life. I've worked a lot of jobs. Now, of course, law enforcement was the longest.
Right.
Being a cop is the easiest job I have ever had. Okay. So don't let a cop come in here and tell you, "Oh, this is so hard, this is so difficult." You know what you signed up for. Right. Either you it or you're not.
Right.
It wasn't a hard job.
Right.
And being a sergeant was the easiest of them all. I still worked a shift just like the deputies did. I still worked a shift. But you led a crew, and I'm of the mindset that a supervisor is not there to do your work. or to do the work. He is there to make sure the work gets done. Now, if it's a task that is beyond your capabilities, I will step in and I will do it.
Okay.
And that's what I was there for and I did a lot of the dirty work. But I wasn't there to do your work for you.
Okay.
So I was a sergeant for about 8 years, and I saw sergeants come and go, and after that.
So then you have an election, and I guess Terry Gaddy got sheriff, and that's when you made not chief deputy, but you were in charge of the field
division. So Terry Gaddy won the election.
Okay.
And I had Terry was the sheriff at the time. Before him would never promote Gaddy to division commander, but he did make him a first sergeant. So basically he was doing field commander stuff without the title, but he was a first sergeant. No, I think they had finally promoted him to lieutenant.
Okay.
And he took some time off, as you know. They're getting into a lot of details before the election. So they needed somebody to fill that role. So I pretty much was doing field commander stuff, even as a regular sergeant.
Okay. Because the rank was so much different. I think people these days don't appreciate how long it used to take to make rank. And
exactly. So like I said, I made sergeant in 9 years. It took me 9 years. And the sergeant then is what most a lieutenant is now. And a lieutenant was a division commander.
Yep.
Of course now it's captains and
then a major up above it. It's crazy.
And all of it started about that time because Terry Gaddy won the election, and he still didn't come back to work immediately. And there was an interim sheriff because the sheriff at the time had retired. An interim sheriff had taken over. That interim sheriff actually appointed me to lieutenant over field division before Gaddy ever took office.
Okay.
But it was with the blessing of Terry. And so when Terry took office, I became captain and division commander of field operations. So
what was that? So when did you make team leader for the SWAT team?
I was still a sergeant then. Probably our SWAT team was started in 1989, and I was one of the original members.
So that's really, really early on.
It was.
And y'all got trained by LAPD, right? Is that correct? Or?
No. We actually Lynchburg. We went to our basic SWAT school. A few of us went to Lynchburg. Was hosting it back then.
Okay.
And then we went to Anniston, Alabama, and got some training. But that was into the 90s. We went to Alabama and got that training.
But y'all were probably one of the first sheriff's offices that had a TAC team.
Yep.
A SWAT team.
Yep.
What did y'all call it? Y'all called it a
SRT, Special Response Team.
Okay.
It was a special response team.
So you get that. So you're in charge of that before.
Yes, before I was. So Terry Gaddy, again, he was first sergeant at the time. I think they made him the team leader, and then I was assistant team leader, but he never took a real active role in training and whatnot. And then shortly thereafter, he became, even before he had become sheriff, of course, he was the team commander. And
you rotated into the role.
And I was team leader.
Okay.
And I pretty much ran that team even as a team leader.
So go into I think one of the things that we talk a lot about athletes and things like that, especially on this show, is what do you think it means when it says you work to failure and then you train past it? What does that mean to you?
So my mantra has always been, and I don't know where I come up with the term, but it was probably just in casual conversation with somebody, but it's focused discipline.
Okay.
And what the term focused discipline means is be focused enough to know what needs to be done and disciplined enough to do it regardless of the circumstances.
Okay. So how would you apply that in training, and how would you apply that in actual operations?
So anytime you're training, you're learning something new, you have to teach the fundamentals first, the basic how-to.
Okay.
And you just hammer the fundamentals.
Okay.
Once you and your guys are getting the grasp of, or your students are getting the grasp of the fundamentals, start to put them under pressure. because, and at some point, push them to the point of beyond failure.
Okay.
To where you're so tired. It hurts.
Right.
You're so wore out. Okay. You're so exhausted that you can't think anymore.
Okay.
And now you're running on pure instinct.
Okay. All
of a sudden, what you have been trained to do, it's just what you do. You don't have to think about it. In a stressful situation, your reaction to that can't be a decision as much as it is an instinct. Mm-hmm. It's just a reaction. Okay. And that reaction has to be based off of your training. And that's why the training has to be on point.
Level. Right.
And it has to be exact. It has to be, this is the way we do this. Okay. And then you push them until they can't think. They want to quit. Mm-hmm. In sports. Okay. I had a high school coach that was brutal. I mean, we if he got mad at us, one of his favorite sayings was, GD, we will run till I get tired. And we just started running.
And he would never get tired.
Of course he wouldn't. And so we would just run. And I'll never forget one day, and I remember the boy's name, but I'm not going to say it. He just dropped. It was like 2 days, summer practice. Yep. He dropped right there. And I thought to myself, I mean, I wasn't going to say it out loud, but, I was one of the team captains, and
I think we're done for today.
Yeah, I said, well, yeah. I said, well, good. I said, well, I've already got to teach him. He's killed one of us now. I reckon we get to go inside now. He said, everybody move over to the left. Keep running. And it was just those
wind sprint.
Down and back. And this kid was there, and all of a sudden, the rescue squad had to come.
And y'all were still running.
Still running. I thought, oh, God, how many of us has got to die before this practice is going to be over?
That's
I was at UVA, summer practice. Mm-hmm. And in high school, we only got water once a day. You got water right in the middle. Mm-hmm. You got for 15 minutes. You take as much water as you can. That's the only water you got. Camel
and be sloshing around.
You could not take your helmet off without permission, and you could not sit.
At UVA, that was
no. In high school.
High school. Okay.
I get to UVA, and
you got people coming up and offering you water.
I mean, everybody's drinking water, and I'm sitting over there. I ain't took my helmet off. They're sitting on their helmets. College players sitting on their helmets, middle of the practice, and I'm sitting there with standing up, helmet on, and I was a little more country than most of the teammates there, and one of them said, "Hey, country, you better drink some water." I said, be damned if I'm drinking no water without some permission. I said, y'all gonna get, we're gonna run till we die. And one of them said, what kind of backwoods programs you come from?
And said Brooklyn High School.
I told him, I said, man, I ain't drinking no water till that man says I can drink water.
Okay. You thought it was a trick.
But what I learned that day, the position coach came over, he said, let me tell you something. I said, man, these practices, other than having to hit them two over there every play, I said, these practices ain't that hard.
Right.
And he says, and I remember this to this day, and that kind of stuck with me. Two things stuck with me. One, at UVA, he says, it's not my job to get you in shape. Mm-hmm. If you want to be part of this team, you show up in shape.
Okay.
You get yourself in shape.
And I hone you out.
I'm going to teach you how to be a team, but you're going to be,
as an individual, you're going to be.
In high school, it was kind of opposite. We would show up out of shape, and he would get us in shape.
Right.
But I learned two things. Number one, in high school, I learned how to be pushed. When you thought you were going to die, you got 2-3 more gears.
Yep.
You're not going to die.
Even if you fall out, the rest of you
right. I mean, that boy didn't die. I guess he's probably still living to this day. And but there was no sympathy.
No.
You move over and you kept
keep
going.
Running.
So therefore, that's kind of what I tried to do. So, it was rare because, like I said, all of my teams, my TAC teams, you show up and you get yourself in shape. There, you had to prove to me once a year that you were still in shape.
Right.
We had a physical standard. Any goal has to be measured.
Right.
And so you had to have a standard to be measured by, and it wasn't that difficult. I mean, it's based on what the average 40-year-old adult male can do.
Right.
And we were mostly back in those days in our 20s and 30s.
Right.
Now, my best team ever, we were still going, all of us were in our 40s and some of us in their late 40s, and we were still competing in SWAT competitions.
But do you think the reason y'all were competitive is because you knew each other so well that you could what was the secret sauce that made that team better? The athlete, they weren't as athletic. They may or may not have been more proficient with firearms, but what made them better? And you stayed competitive with teams that were probably full-time teams.
I think that the one thing is that most of them stuck around long enough to be good at what they did. Okay. There wasn't the turnover then that there is now. I think the quality of candidates was better.
The pool was better
to choose from, was much better. And I don't know. I just think it was maybe it's a cultural thing or a generational thing, to where that generation, which is not that, we're only talking 20, 30 years ago, was just, you had a little bit more pride in self, and they just wanted to be part of something that was good.
Right.
And
I think a lot of it is just people think that I just show up. I know, especially in canine, like people wanted to have canine on the side of the car and all this other stuff. They weren't really willing to put in the work that was necessary to accomplish what needed to be accomplished.
I had a guy that I couldn't get him to show up to training.
Okay.
And I called him aside one day and I said, hey, I said, you need to come to training. You're only allowed to miss 2 a year.
Okay.
I said, you've already missed 3. I said, what's going on? He said, look, let's be honest. He said, this looks good on a resume. I said, you have got to be joking. Are you serious? This is why you're on this team. And he was a good athlete. He was a gym rat. He was a good athlete. And I can make him, most people I can make a good shooter out of. And if you'll listen to tactics is not rocket science. I mean, it's just X's and O's.
It's being decisive and learn how to read.
Right. It's
read what you have.
Then I do this. If you take that job, I got this job. Find work. So what we've always said, find work.
Exactly.
He could do that, but he wouldn't show up. And I said, you seriously, this is what you want? And he said, I just want this on my resume. And I said, good, put it on your resume because you're no longer on my team. And he was gone. And right there was no question. Sheriff it wasn't up for debate. That was my decision. You're gone. And he was gone.
No, I think that. So what made that team with the older guys better, you think?
Longevity. They stuck together. I mean, we were on that team and all of us stuck together. Like I said, we were still in our I was 49 at our last, 48, 49, our last SWAT competition. And I was team commander, had been team commander I was commander for, officially for 12 years. And that was the end and I retired at 50. Okay. So this was at the end. And, we were still competing and, several of the other guys were a year or two younger than me. And some of them were in the early 40s. The youngest guy on our team at the time was 29 and he was 10 years younger than the next guy. I mean, we were all older guys and they just stuck around because we had pride in being part of something that we knew was good.
And you pushed each other. As individuals, you were good, but as a team, I think that it's a culture. It really is. It's a culture of like, hey, we're not just here to show up. We're here to accomplish a mission. And it's just being hyper focused on that, I think.
From a trainer's aspect, I compare a lot of things to sports.
Okay.
Keeping people together long enough to be good, building a culture, not tolerating certain things. I once suspended my best friend for something that I nor the team approved of, work related.
Right.
And, he'd come to me and he said, we're friends, we're hunting buddies. And I said, you don't understand.
That's not where we are now.
This is not a me and you thing. This is us. This is the group. The team's not happy with your performance. And this was what he had done was a field operations, was a work, your daily job. Yep. And that's one thing that I demanded from my teams was not only do I expect you to be exceptional on this team, but you are to be the top 10% of this agency. Everyone at this agency will look up to you. Our cases will be followed up on.
Right.
All of your work will be done. You will not abuse leave time.
Right.
You were all of them were stellar deputies, and they took great pride in it.
So what does it look like for you to be in a department that long? And it's kind of a side thing, but like, what does it mean to you to look at some of those younger guys that you trained up who are now in the leadership positions? Do you feel like the culture is still there? Or how do you, when you look at it, do you look at it as like, hey, I put a lot of time and effort in these guys. They're doing the best they can with what they have, but like, I know the core of who they are as individuals.
A lot of the guys that I train, and again, part of being a good leader is setting up your who succeeds you.
Okay.
And you should be grooming a few to replace. And I did. And that's had a lot to do with why I retired. Well, I always said when I got hired at 21 years old and the sheriff told me that you can retire at 50, I knew then I was going to walk at that door at 50 years old.
Okay.
But I knew that a lot of people didn't. But the reason I walked out the very first day I could walk out is because I had prepared at least 2 guys.
Okay.
And they wanted that job. They were ready for that job. And it was no point in me lingering around. And to be quite honest, I was burnt. I mean, I was 29 years in, and I gave this career everything I had. I mean, it was I was burnt, and I was ready to go. But I wasn't going to just linger around collecting big paychecks because
you could.
Yeah. And but those guys have now, most of those have retired. So a lot of the people that I led have also gone on to retire. So what you're seeing now is some of the people that may have been influenced by those that I influenced, or may have some influence over me, because a lot of them still come to me to this day and tell stories that they've heard. So the culture has changed. It's quite a bit. And I don't know whether it's where it started, whether it's just a society thing, a generational thing, but the culture has changed dramatically.
So we'll circle back to that, but I think one of the things I really wanted to hear about is to kind of break it up a little bit for us is tell us your, so we talk about people and things like that. Tell us your favorite SWAT story. You're a team commander for 12 years. What's your favorite story?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I mean, some of our stories.
Give me the most entertaining one.
I'll tell you. This one. So the story I'll tell you that it's got entertainment value, but it also has high drama, and it was one of our more hair raising, I guess. The deputies called me. It was in the middle of the night. The road deputies called me at home and said, "Hey, we got a hostage barricade in a trailer park." I said, "All right." I said, "I will be in."
That's a lot going on in one place,
right? So I called. The investigator on call was also the lead or one of the negotiators.
Okay,
and he was former SRT.
Okay.
So he's my kind of guy.
Right. So yeah. He's not like your typical negotiator.
You're like, he's en route.
Y'all are working in tandem instead of like, hey, we're going to negotiate with this. And your negotiations are like, hey, we're working towards a common good here. We're not in competition.
Right. So and a lot of times what I would do is as a commander, I would call the team leader, and we would get there first, and we would just, we try to manage overtime. If this wasn't an SRT operation, then he and I would just help the field resolve it.
Okay.
But the thing we do if it was a team thing, while they were getting there, we would do the scouting.
Okay.
So I get there, negotiator gets there, and he starts talking. The only thing he's armed with is a knife.
Okay.
And the hostage is his ex-girlfriend. And he would come to the window on the trailer it was a little triangle window. He would come to the window and stick his head up at the window. And the negotiator was right on the other side of the door talking to him.
Okay.
And
so you had positive contact.
Oh, yeah. And we had the field division. They had
the perimeter.
All the perimeter. And they were with him. So if he all of a sudden opened the door and charged, not only do I know that the negotiator is probably more capable than the field guy.
But you knew it was coming.
So I started to do my scouting. Well, I found that the back door to the trailer was open, was unlocked. So I just kind of held what I had, and I eased back around, and so that guy never knew I was there.
So you're like, I'm doing well.
So I'm going to be the jack in the box, the surprise all of a sudden. So, in a hostage, she was sitting on the couch, so she wasn't even close to him.
So we're not talking about like gun to the head, knife to the head, knife to the neck, or anything.
Not at the moment. Okay. So
she's just bored with us.
So the negotiator's telling me he's keeping me informed of where the hostage is in relation to the hostage taker. And
right.
The negotiator, he's talking to him. He's getting nowhere. He's absolutely getting nowhere. Well, the team shows up, and I said, and I briefed him. I said, guys, we're gonna move in that back door like a cat.
Okay.
We're gonna sneak in. I said, we're gonna be quiet. I had one guy that was point. He was lethal. If this thing turns lethal, you're got him.
You're gonna zip him up.
I'm the second one, and I've got a distraction device.
Flashbang.
Well, you're not supposed to call them that.
Those loud. What do they call them?
Technically, it's a distraction device, but the common name is flashbang.
Okay.
It's a lot of light, a lot of sound.
Okay.
So the plan was I was going to pitch it between him and her. Closer to him, at him. Right,
but give you a little separation.
So he wouldn't lunge for her.
He's going away from her.
Right, he's going to move away from the bang.
They're both moving away from each other, in theory.
The third guy took her.
And got her out of the way.
And shielded her. The rest, everybody else would pick up his slack.
Okay. That's a good plan.
Fine work.
Right.
Fine work. So everybody had a role. Well, as soon as we come in the back and we move to the living room, he had now somehow another, she was beside him.
Oh boy.
So now he's holding a knife. She's beside, he doesn't have it up to her third one. I said, shit, we're here now. I mean, we got to do it.
Okay.
So I threw the distraction device and I just kind of pushed it. And, I wanted to get it between them, and I knew that she was a little close to it. And of course I missed her, but I guess I pushed it a little too fast, and that thing was like a baseball, and it went right into a curio case. It was a glass case.
Okay.
I didn't know where it went, to be honest with you, but it landed on the second shelf of that curio case.
Okay.
And when it went off, it was just, well, it stunned him. He dropped the knife. The lethal guy just hit him.
Right. I
was right behind him. We hit him so hard we went through a door and into the bedroom, onto the bed, and he's in cuffs. The other guy had shielded her. He had her. It was the greatest thing in the world. I mean, it was just hero.
Stuff stories are made of.
Yeah, man, I'm proud.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
It was. Hostage rescue, man. I mean, it was great.
Where's he expecting you to come from?
She turned around and looked, and she says, "That was my unicorn collection." And I said,
"You killed the unicorns?"
The curio case was full of collectible unicorns.
So she wasn't happy to be alive. She was just sad.
That dude had like unicorns stuck in his forehead. I mean, I thought it was going, she's in shock. She's just mad because we didn't blow up her unicorns. It didn't end there. She told victim witness advocate about the unicorn case, and that we had blowed up the unicorn case. And so here, it isn't like the movies, kids.
Oh, yeah.
The hero doesn't get the girl.
Nope.
You get a complaint called in on you for blowing up a collection of unicorns.
A collection of unicorns. I'm still alive, but I'm unhappy because you killed my unicorn.
Right. So that
Any other good SWAT stories?
Oh, I mean, it's countless. I mean, it's, I don't know how many we did over the years. Some of them, there weren't so happy endings. Most were.
So let's talk about that just for a second. I know we haven't gone into this a lot, but I think one of the things you said earlier, law enforcement is really easy, but it's not when you have a situation where you have a TAC call out and it doesn't go well.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
If it doesn't go well?
So you could have the best plan, but things don't line up. How do you deal with that?
I never really had one that just was a catastrophe. Some of them didn't go quite as planned, but then again, I've also believed I have never choreographed an operation. it has to be fluent.
Okay.
You have to know X's and O's.
Right.
And again, find work.
Right.
And know what to do. Everyone knows how to do everyone else's job, because just because you start out in this position doesn't mean you're going to end up in that position.
Right.
So I won't say most all of them went exactly according to plan. Sometimes due to decisions made by the suspect, they changed, and it was not a happy outcome for them. But you try every one of them. None of them were perfect.
Right.
No day is perfect. And you learn from the mistakes that you make.
And I think that's the key. I think the key is I think sometimes when we survive an encounter, whether it be attack, call, or something else, we have this false sense of like, I really did good. I think the ones that are the best at what they do are the ones that are like, man, that could have gone a lot of different ways than it did. How do we train and prepare for that? One of the things I'd like you to talk about, I know it's not a pleasant experience, but like you were probably one of the first officers in this area that was involved in an officer-involved shooting. I mean, we've had a lot since then. What was that like, and how did it change the way the trajectory of your career?
Well, I'd been a firearms instructor for a few years.
Okay.
And the only training I'd ever really been to was at the local academy. And the instructors there were taught how to teach at that academy. Okay. They really wasn't taught cutting edge
technology and just tactics.
But keep in mind that I'm competitive by nature.
Okay. Being
from a sports background and a gym rat, I was competitive. So and keep in mind, I shot a 73 in the academy. So,
but you twirled the gun to get it back.
Yeah. So I was pretty artistic with that. But
did you get style points for that? No style points.
No, I got a butt chewing for that.
Okay.
But being competitive, it was me and another guy that we just kept pushing each other. Now, I learned firearms. I was pretty much self-taught.
Okay.
And we learned it ass backwards. I became fast before I became accurate.
Okay.
Our theory, us two idiots, was that a fast 98 will beat a slow 100 every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so I was really, really fast, and I was still better than most. I mean, I'm shooting 98s, 99s on a consistent basis, and I'm doing it fast.
But every time you go to the range, you're trying to get faster.
And that's the thing. Okay. I felt like I'm accurate enough. And I'm killing deer with pistols. I'm killing squirrels with pistols.
So you're accurate too.
I'm pretty accurate. So I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Okay.
Well, on this night, several things came to light. Number one, I'm going to try not to get into so much detail. It's hard to tell who will ever hear and see all this, and I don't want to get into a lot. But anyway, suspected taken a hostage, and he had already literally butchered her. She was not technically deceased yet. First officer gets on scene, confronts him. And I guess the way that a lot of officers were trained, I guess we was probably trained then, is try to, through diplomacy. There's a time for diplomacy and there's a time for action. And he just used way too much diplomacy. And the next thing you know, he becomes a victim.
Okay. And
he gets attacked. Okay. And, but he's faster than the suspect. So
faster from a standpoint of running.
He runs. And I'm pulling him, and I see this. I'm still in the car.
So you pull up, the call comes out as that she was getting beat.
The call comes out that she was first call come out that he was beating her in the parking lot, and then the second call says no, he's got a knife. He's stabbing her.
Okay.
And so I'm running as fast as a car will run. I'm coming through the parking lot of this of an apartment complex, and I see him chasing the deputy, and my first instinct was just to hit him with the car. They were running circles around another parked car.
Okay.
And I was just going to hit him with the car because, he had almost caught that deputy. And when he saw me coming, he stopped and turned, and he actually rolled over the car to keep me from hitting him. So I slid to a stop, and I rolled out the car. Well, he went back to the victim, and he tried to pick her up to use her as a human shield, and he put the knife to her throat. And I come out of the car, planted my feet, found my front sight. This was a T-zone shot. I mean, she was
way below him.
Way below him. I had a perfect headshot and he wasn't moving.
Okay.
This is what we were trained for. This is how we stand here, we shoot there.
Right.
Start to take pressure out the trigger, and I realized there is a picture where the apartment was right behind him, and there was 3 people looking out the window. I had the wherewithal to recognize that this shot does not go as planned, or even if it exits, that it's going to go through that window, has the potential to go through that window. So I start to take a step to the left to change the angle. So now I'm moving. Well, I've never trained like this before.
Okay.
So I take a step. Well, when he sees that, he charges and he drops her and comes at me full speed. He's moving. We've never trained like that. I fired 5 rounds, and there was no body cameras back then, no car cameras, no nothing. But there was one of the witnesses was on the phone, so the dispatcher was on the phone.
Could hear you shooting.
They could hear my verbal commands. They could hear the shots. The shots were fired. There was 5 shots fired in about 1.5 seconds. We had never trained at that rate of fire.
Right.
So. Also the takeaway from it was like a bad dream. Those bullets should have been working, and the only one that worked was the last one. They all but one hit. So one was a clean miss. The others were all center mass, but the one that worked was the one that hit a switch. And in training, we talk about timers and switches. Mm-hmm. There are some injuries that you will succumb to your injuries
immediately,
but the clock is ticking. That's a timer.
Yeah.
Then there are switches, and those switches it's an immediate reaction.
That's the end.
That's over. And so I hit a switch.
Okay.
It was over. So, I had time to think, after that, this was nothing like I'd ever trained for before. And I'm a firearms instructor at this point, but I was a early firearms instructor. At that point, I just started going there by myself, and I started to develop things. So number one, accuracy does matter.
Yeah, because if you hadn't been accurate, you'd have been a victim too.
But also, I'm moving, he's moving, so you can't count on exact bullet placement.
No.
So therefore, rate of fire is extremely important. And to get accurate rate of fire, you have to have recoil control, management, recoil. You can't control recoil. You can only manage it. So you have to have management of recoil at a high rate of fire with a greater degree of accuracy.
Right.
So we'd always been taught that that sight alignment and trigger control was everything.
Right.
Well, I started thinking, well, it's hard to get that rate of fire with all of this perfect trigger. All I remember is to get that rate of fire, I slap a trigger.
Yeah.
Just slap it.
Really quick. And
other than that T-zone shot that I first had, I never saw a front sight. Mm-mm. So sight alignment is out the window in a lethal encounter. And in most cases, when it happens that fast, 1.5 seconds, a charge at that close a range, 1.5 seconds, your sight alignment and trigger control are non-existent, almost non-existent. I mean, virtually non-existent. So what mattered? It was management of recoil. So I started training that. Now this was in the 90s. Well, all of a sudden, 20 years later, I started going to some schools and I started to hear some of the same things I've been teaching for 10, 15 years. Now, don't take me wrong. I learned the terminology to use. I learned the verbiage that these world-known instructors are using. But I would send other people to schools. They'd come back and say, Kevin, you were right. They're teaching this. Mm-hmm. But when I taught it, it was, eye rolls like, this is just Schmitt being Schmitt. This right. No one would believe it until there's an old saying, you know what makes an expert? Carry a briefcase into another state. that makes you an expert. If no one there knows you, then oh my God, he must know his thing.
He's really smart.
But the local guy could be saying the same thing, and nobody's going to really buy into it because they've known you forever and heard all your dumb ideas too. but no, and I beat my head against the wall at the academy. I had become one of the lead instructors, but all of the instructors were still teaching stand here, shoot there. They taught you how to qualify. They really didn't teach you how to gunfight.
Yeah.
And that's what this is.
It is.
When it gets lethal, it's a gunfight.
Yes.
And so how can I teach this? And the fundamentals had to change. So I was one of the first around here, I don't know, that said that the most important thing was grip. To manage recoil, you have to have a great grip. Mm-hmm. The stance is important, but not that important because you may be moving.
Yes.
So the stance is not. The platform is not that important. It was the grip. If you hold the gun exactly the same way every time, then you're going to get a degree of consistency.
Right. Everything's going in the same direction.
But I had to. It was like pulling teeth. The older instructors just did not want to do it. In the meantime, we're still, every year, we're making new instructors.
Okay.
Based on old shit.
Yeah.
So finally, when some of the older ones retire, and they were really, really good at fundamentals. But, again, the fundamentals, that's your building blocks. But now we got to take it.
You got to implement it.
So I was finally able, right before I just retired for the last time, was able to, with the help of a handful of the other range masters, we came up with a way to teach you how to shoot before we got into qualifying.
Right.
So, and it was a lot of it was based on the very first thing we learn is management of recoil.
Right.
And the grip, how to hold the gun a certain way to get that. But I started that back in the 90s and with my own people. And
since you've retired, you've done a lot as far as training people on concealed carry, correct?
Yeah.
And what do you think is the difference between training civilians and training law enforcement?
Well, first of all, you don't have you've only got a couple hours or I've taught two different, concealed carry can either be a classroom by Virginia codes. It does not require live fire. And a lot of your places don't require it. A lot of schools, a lot of your concealed carry classes don't require it. I've done it both ways. As a business, you make way more money just classroom only. The last time I taught those, I was starting to take them out to the range. Now, so the classroom is about a 4-hour classroom. Mm-hmm. The range time, and I could only take about 4 people out to tackle. There was only one of me, so they would shoot one at a time for safety reasons and whatnot. But that's all you had. So you had to really. It was basically just teaching a civilian what a gun feels like to shoot it. But I would teach them basically the same thing. A student is a student. And right. It's just an abbreviated version. But a law enforcement, the thing you got to teach a cop is not only how, but why. Why is this important to you?
Right.
So, and forgive me if my stories are a little bit crass, but you got to tell some war stories to understand that this can happen. It does happen. It will happen. And this is why it's important that you need to be good at this.
Right. The
overwhelming majority of cops will never use their gun. This whole thing that they'll never draw it out. The guns are get drawn a lot of times, but very few ever actually press a trigger.
Right.
And that becomes hammered into their head. Well, nobody else. God, he's been a cop here for 30 years. He's never had to shoot nobody, so I probably won't either. So they don't take it real serious. So the hardest part as an instructor is teaching them why this is important.
Okay.
And I've had one of the most satisfying things is I've got SWAT teams from all over the state that I've taught through the basic SWAT school that have called me. They've been in some bad things. They've reached out to me and said, "Hey, you were right. We went through some shit last night, and you were right." That feels good. We all made it out alive. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No, absolutely.
That feels good. I've had individual officers that have been involved in shootings. Early on, I would reach out and I would talk to them, and I wanted to know
if what you were teaching was working.
Well, not only that, but tell me. I wanted to learn from their experience. Did you see your sights? Did you what was your rate of fire? What was the distance to the target? How many hits versus misses? And so I would learn what was my case unique, and it wasn't. My case was not that unique. Most of the time, what I'm getting is the same thing, same feedback.
Right.
And nothing's 100%. There was some variations here and there. But the other thing is I started to get people that was involved in shootings reach out to me and say, hey, you were right.
Right. This is what I experienced.
What you said, what happened.
Right.
This is what it feels like.
So what does it feel like after going through all that? What does it feel like? How does that feel to think I not only survived a violent incident, but I've taken that experience and given it to, at this point, I would say thousands of people.
Again, it was a tragic incident, and I'm in no way glad that it happened. I would say that there was the takeaway from it is I learned a lot, and it made. But
you pass that wisdom on to other officers who have survived.
That's if there's anything good to come of this horrific incident, was that I took the experience, and I think a lot of people take it, and everybody deals with trauma differently. Some bottled up and never speak of it, but me, I learned from it, and I said, how can I make not only myself better, but how can I make others better in case this happens to them? People, I don't know, you could probably tell that my whole demeanor had just changed. Your line of questions about football and all that, I was one person. And then all of a sudden I get very, very serious and it's not the shooting that gets me there. It's the passion that I have for surviving a shooting.
But I think there have been, I would say most of the instances of officer involved shootings for people that graduated from the academy in Lynchburg were students of yours. And that says something. I don't ever want to think like, hey, we as a group of people have survived it because of one person. But I certainly think that you've had a huge impact on a lot of people that have survived violent incidents and went home to their families. So if nobody else tells you, I appreciate what you've done.
Well, I appreciate that. I think we all as humans, we learn from a lot of different things. So I was a small part in people's learning. You didn't
get your nickname from being a small part. I mean, you got nice hair, but that's not it. So in conclusion, one of the things I would like you to do is I would like you to tell like what is life like after law enforcement?
I gave it up. I was working with a local agency not too long ago, and I was, I could tell that, and I was teaching at the academy, and I could tell the students coming through were not, the discipline is gone.
Okay.
And in all fairness, I had started to lose my temper at the academy over things that, it didn't matter. So I was I never lost the passion for teaching for firearms, as you can see.
Right.
That's still there.
Right.
But dealing with people who didn't care has started to weigh on me. I was hunting one morning. I decided I'm done, and I'm gonna go hunt.
Okay.
So I hunted, and I had to just had hip replacement, so I knew I had to get my hip replaced, and so after hunting season, I got my hip replaced, and I thought that was going to put me down for a while. In 2 weeks, I was back. I was turkey hunting in 2 weeks, so that didn't put me down. But now it was turkey season. Okay. So then turkey season was over, and I said, "Well, I'm bored."
Okay.
So now I done started a lawn care company.
What's it called? This is my favorite.
This started on a boat with my brother-in-law and his wife and my wife are sisters, and so it was just 4 of us, and we had, he does some lawn care on the side, and I was helping my nephew with his business, Schmitt's Lawn Care. That's his business, not mine.
I want to know about yours.
So he was supposed to be giving us some work, but he said, I don't really have a lot of work for y'all right now. So this was probably, there was several beers in, and my brother-in-law said, maybe we ought to start our own company. And I said, I laughed, and I said, what we're going to call it, 2 Old Men Lawn Care? And both our wives laughed, perked up, and said, that's perfect. And he says, I'm serious, we should. And I said, I ain't getting into this big time. I said, get a few yards, and so we got, and I'm going to do things right if I'm going to do it. So I got insurance. We got insurance, and so Two Old Men Lawn Care is our lawn care business. But also I hadn't taught a concealed carry class since last October. I taught one. I taught my niece and nephew right before I gave it all up in November. But because I always promised them I'd do their class for them so they get their certificate. But I hadn't done one for the public since probably last summer.
Okay.
And I started. I never got rid of the business. I just wasn't doing anything. So I'm doing that again. So JKS Training and Consulting is back up and running. So I do concealed carry classes with JKS.
Did they get a picture with you when they finish it?
If they want one, not many people ask.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
They
just don't have taste.
I've taken pictures of them with holding their targets, and you would be surprised at if I can have someone. And I don't do a lot of the range training anymore with them, but the last time I did it, if I can have somebody that has no bad habits, a blank slate. And I teach them from start to finish. Within 1 hour, most are shooting better than a deputy or a police academy student is in 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I'm doing those two things. And when hunting season rolls around, I'm hunting.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on. It is always good to see you. And I do want you to know I appreciate what you've done. And I know there are a lot of people just like me that do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.